The diner on Elm Street opened at 6 every morning. By 6:15, Raymond Cole was already in his usual booth, second from the window, left side, with a black coffee, a folded newspaper, and the quiet that comes from a man who has spent decades listening and has finally decided to simply rest. He was 63 years old, slim build, silver haircut close, wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a plain beige jacket and dark slacks. He looked like a retired school teacher, or perhaps an accountant who had closed his last file and made peace with it. He looked like nobody important. That was something he had spent 31 years perfecting. Raymond Cole had joined the police force at 22. He spent the first 7 years on patrol, and the next 24 in the Internal Affairs Division of the Maplewood City Police Department, the unit responsible for investigating officers who violated their oath. He had opened over 300 investigations. He had ended 217 careers. He had retired 14 months ago with no ceremony, no send-off, and no regrets. Now he drank his coffee, folded his newspaper, and watched the morning come through the diner window. He was halfway through his second cup when the patrol car pulled up outside. 2 officers stepped out. Raymond watched them the way he had always watched officers, quietly, completely, missing nothing. The first was young, mid-20s, big through the shoulders. He walked with the particular swagger of a man who had been given authority before he had earned wisdom. His name tag read, Officer B. Greer. Greer pushed open the diner door and let it swing without holding it. His eyes moved around the room fast, surface level, looking for threat rather than truth. His gaze landed on Raymond. He walked over. You. He said it like it was already an accusation. How long have you been sitting here? Raymond looked up from his newspaper slowly. Good morning, officer. I asked you a question. I've been here for about 40 minutes. Greer looked at the table, the coffee cup, the newspaper, the old man in the beige jacket who had not flinched when he walked over. That seemed to bother him. You got an ID? Raymond set down his newspaper carefully. May I ask what this is regarding? There was a report of a suspicious individual in the area. You matched the description. Raymond looked at him for a moment. The description, Raymond knew without asking, was simply this: an older black man sitting quietly in a diner on Elm Street, minding his own business, in a neighborhood where some people had still not decided that black men were allowed to simply exist without explanation. I see, Raymond said. He reached slowly into his jacket. Greer's hand moved toward his belt. Raymond noticed. He kept his movement slow and steady and brought out a plain brown wallet. He opened it and produced his driver's license. Greer snatched it. Cole. Raymond Cole. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Says here you live on the east side. That's correct. Long way from home. It's a 40-minute drive, officer. I like this diner. Why this diner? Raymond tilted his head slightly. Because the coffee is good. Something about the calmness seemed to irritate Greer further. Stand up, he said. The diner had gone completely quiet. The woman behind the counter, her name was Doris, 60 years old, had owned this place for 22 years, stood very still, watching. An elderly couple near the back stopped eating. A young man with a laptop closed it slowly. Raymond folded his newspaper, set it on the table, and stood up, unhurried, with the stillness of a man who had stood in rooms far more hostile than this one and never once lost his footing. Turn around, Greer said. Raymond turned around. Greer patted him down roughly, quickly, finding nothing because there was nothing to find. Sit back down, Greer said. Raymond sat today. Greer tossed the ID onto the table like it was a receipt he didn't need. Stay in your own neighborhood, he said. People around here don't need strangers making them uncomfortable. He turned to leave. And Raymond Cole, who had spent 31 years choosing every word he said with surgical precision, spoke. Officer Greer. Greer stopped, turned slowly. Before you go, Raymond said, his voice completely level. I want to make sure I understood correctly. You stopped me, requested my identification, conducted a pat-down, and advised me to stay in my own neighborhood. Is that an accurate summary of what occurred here? Greer stared at him. You got a problem? Not at all. I simply like to be precise. Greer held his gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he turned and walked out. Raymond picked up his ID, replaced it in his wallet, placed his wallet back in his jacket. He picked up his coffee cup. It was cold now. He signaled to Doris for a fresh cup. She brought it over and set it down gently. You all right, hun? Raymond smiled. Perfectly fine, Doris. Thank you. He opened his newspaper again, but his mind was already working. What Officer B. Greer did not know was several things. The first was that Raymond still had the personal numbers of every supervisor, every captain, every deputy chief, and every internal affairs officer currently working in the Maplewood City Police Department. The second was that Doris's diner had security cameras at 3 angles. All of them are working, all of them recording. The third was that the young man with the laptop, Daniel, 27 years old, journalism student at Maplewood State, had not closed his laptop because he was frightened. He had closed it because he had switched from typing to recording. The fourth, and most important, thing was this. Raymond Cole had spent 24 years as an internal affairs investigator not because he was assigned to it, but because he had asked for it. Because he believed, with every cell in his body, that a badge was a promise, and that breaking that promise was the worst thing a person in authority could do. Raymond finished his coffee, left a generous tip, drove home. He sat at his kitchen table, opened his laptop, and began to write. He wrote everything: the time, the location, the name on the badge, the words used, the pat-down, the tone, the instruction to stay in his own neighborhood, the ID tossed on the table like trash. He wrote it the way he had written 300 investigation reports, methodically, factually, without emotion and without mercy. Then he picked up his phone. He did not call a lawyer. He called Captain Elaine Marsh, former colleague, current head of internal affairs, Maplewood City PD. She picked up on the second ring. "Raymond, it's been a while." "It has," he said. "Elaine, I need to file a formal complaint. And I need you to pull the body camera footage from Unit 4 to 17 this morning before anyone has a chance to review it unofficially." A pause. "Raymond, what happened?" He told her. By the time he finished, she was very quiet. "Send me your written account," she said. "Tonight." "Already drafted," he said. "Sending it now." The investigation opened the following Monday. Officer Greer was not told who had filed the complaint. He was simply called into a room and told that his conduct during a stop on the morning of the 14th was under review. He sat across from two internal affairs investigators and he was calm, relaxed. The kind of relaxation that comes from having done something many times before without consequence. He said the stop was routine, said he had received a call, said the encounter had been professional. He said it all smoothly, rehearsed, confidence. Then the investigators placed three things on the table. The first was the diner security footage. 3 angles. 17 minutes of recording that contradicted nearly everything he had just said. The second was Daniel's phone recording. Clear audio. Every word. The third was a printed copy of the formal complaint, signed at the bottom by the complainant. Greer looked at the name. His face changed. Raymond Cole. He knew that name. Every officer in the department knew that name. He looked up at the investigators and something behind his eyes shifted, the certainty draining out of him slowly, like air from a tire. "I'd like to speak to a union representative," he said. "Of course," the investigator said. "But Officer Greer, I want you to understand something first. The man you stopped that morning spent 24 years in this department investigating officers exactly like you. He has written more successful disciplinary reports than any investigator in the history of this division. He does not make mistakes, and he does not forget details." Greer said nothing. He also found 3 prior complaints filed against you in the last 2 years that were closed without full review. We will be reopening all of them. The room was very quiet. The review board met 5 weeks later. It was a Thursday morning. Raymond was present. He sat in the gallery, in plain clothes, hands folded in his lap, expression unreadable. The findings were presented one by one. The unlawful stop, the baseless pat-down, the racially motivated harassment, the false report of a prior call that no record supported, the pattern across prior incidents. The board voted. The police chief stood. He called Officer B. Greer to the front of the room. Greer walked forward, jaw tight, eyes straight ahead. The chief spoke about the oath, about the privilege of the badge, about the damage done when that privilege is abused. Then he reached out, and he unpinned the badge from Greer's chest. And he said, "Effective today, you are dismissed from the Maplewood City Police Department. A separate criminal investigation into civil rights violations and filing of a false report is now active." The room was silent. Greer turned and walked out. He did not look at Raymond. Perhaps he knew it would not help him. Perhaps he was ashamed. Or perhaps he simply understood, finally and completely, that he had stopped the wrong man on the wrong morning, and that everything that followed had been entirely his own doing. Outside the building, Raymond stood in the morning sun. Captain Elaine Marsh stood beside him. She looked at him and said, "How do you feel?" He thought about it for a moment. About Tuesday morning. The cold coffee. The ID tossed on the table. The instruction to stay in his own neighborhood. He thought about every man and woman who had sat in a diner or walked down a street or stood on a sidewalk and been made to feel like a problem simply for existing. He thought about all the ones who hadn't had 31 years of training and a network of colleagues to call. He said, "I feel like I like a good cup of coffee." Elaine laughed. They walked to her car. That afternoon, Raymond drove back to Doris's diner on Elm Street. He sat in the second booth from the window. Left side. Doris brought him a black coffee without being asked. She set it down and looked at him with knowing eyes. Heard something on the news this morning, she said simply. Raymond wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Did you? She smiled and walked back to the counter. Raymond picked up his newspaper. He unfolded it. He read, and the coffee, this time, stayed warm all the way to the last sip. Because a man who spent 31 years making sure the law applied to everyone, finally made sure it applied to the man who forgot that it did. Drop a heart if karma found exactly who it was looking for. Red Heart Hash. Subscribe. Because justice, when it finally comes, is worth every second of the wait. Bell.